I'm not following that.
Right. So my point to you is the problem with Islamic concepts of revelation is that it basically breaks the barrier that you set up. So you set up a barrier on one hand that says Allah doesn't enter into his creation, and then in the next breath you break that very rule by saying an attribute of Allah has entered into creation.
As in the Quran, right?
As in the word of Allah.
Yeah.
The word of Allah. Notice I said word, not Quran, right? And it doesn't matter how you try to explain it, the reality is that something created and something uncreated, the word, have met in the created world.
I see it.
Right? So your barrier that you established at the beginning has now been broken. And that's problematic. Whereas our concept of revelation is that God's spirit, because we believe God can enter into his creation, God's spirit enlivens the intellect of the human being to write down his words and his truth.
So from what I understand you're saying is that you believe that God can come into creation. And
God
so
can and does come into creation,
the Quran is an attribute of God, and it entered into creation, you're saying he can enter into creation.
I am pointing out that Muslims have a contradiction within their Aqidah.
As in the entrance into creation?
Yes.
I think from my understanding, the problem where we have entrance into the creation is not that the attributes can't enter, it's that he can't come down as a physical human.
Right.
Into
but
creation.
Is the essence of Allah, but the attributes of Allah possess the essence of Allah.
Yeah.
Which means that if an attribute enters into creation, the essence has also entered into creation as well.
Okay.
And that's the problem.
I mean, is that a problem though?
It is a problem if you're saying that it's not worthy of Allah to enter into his creation.
Well, enter into creation as in come in as a human being.
But
coming down, bringing down for example, we have a hadith of the Prophet, peace be upon him, that God created multiple types of merciness.
Yeah.
And he brought down one to the earth, that this way humans can be merciful to each other. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
So as we can see here, an attribute of God can enter into creation and affect creation.
Right.
But our problem is that it doesn't befit his royalty to enter into creation as a human being.
Right. But
it doesn't make
sense. So let's just come to that, because when we say that God enters into his creation and becomes a human being, right? What we're not saying is that God changes into a human being. Are you aware of that?
So he doesn't become a human being.
He does not change into a human being, which it sounds like is what you're saying.
So is he existing up there while also existing as a human being?
No, what he does is he takes a human nature and he fills it with his divine personhood.
But he's still up there at the same time?
God is still everywhere.
See, that does not make sense to me.
Well, but this is the point, is that it clearly does make sense to you, but you have a rule in your mind that says that nothing that a Christian says about this can make sense.
No,
because
right, but
God can become a book. God's attribute can become a book.
He doesn't become a book. You see, attributes
wait one second,
like love and anger and mercy.
Let's try to think through this logically.
But when he becomes a human, his being...
Why so many cameras on me, bro? There's so many Christian speakers that need a camera. I've got 4 cameras on me.
So here's my issue, just to paint it out, is that the issue with God coming down as a human being, it's as though he's coming down as a full, as his full nature.
He takes, yes, he does.
When he comes down, when he brings down the Quran, he's just bringing down an attribute.
Which has his essence.
There's a difference between an attribute of God and a full being of God.
What's your name, bro?
Abdullah.
Abdullah, just think about logically what you're saying. If the attribute of Allah possesses the essence of Allah, and the attribute enters into creation, then Allah has entered into creation.
Not
Furthermore,
fully.
right, is God divisible?
I think the problem that
is God divisible?
Obviously not. That's
so if the essence of Allah enters with an attribute of Allah into creation, is that whole or part of the essence that has entered into creation?
Attributes such as mercy, example.
That's not my question.
Well, I'm going to answer your question that way.
No, okay. I want the answer to this question. When the attribute of Allah's kalam enters into creation, it possesses the essence of Allah. Does it possess that essence wholly and completely or partially?
the way that you're making it seem like I'm not fully following. Do you want to repeat it one last time?
Everyone can understand this, I promise you.
So
Is it a slice of a cake?
Let me try to answer.
Or is it the whole thing that has entered in creation?
See, the issue is that for you, what you're making it seem like is when you give off love, like let's say you like, or are you married? If you're, let's say you have a girlfriend and you love her, right?
Yeah.
When you send love towards her, you're not dividing yourself. You're giving off an attribute of yourself. So you can't say that anger and love and things, when you give off those things, they're not coming out of you as a division of you. So that's how we believe in Allah,
Yep.
God, is that His attributes can come down, but He can't come down as His whole being.
Yeah.
Because an attribute is not, it's not a divisible part of God.
The problem with your analogy is that me loving a girlfriend, you know, if God was to bless me to have one, me loving to, you know,
Well,
me,
I hope,
no,
you get
yeah,
married.
as God wills.
Getting married is better.
Yeah, amen, totally.
Not girlfriend.
But my point to you is that as the essence, the problem is that you've created this radical division in which you've said God, it's unworthy of God to enter into His creation. If God's essence enters into creation with an attribute, then God has entered into creation. Now, you said it's unworthy of God to take to Himself a humanity because humans sleep, they go to the toilet. But the point is, the recitation.
And they're
One second. The recitation is dependent on creation. The recitation can be corrupted. The Quran can be used as toilet paper. In Saudi Arabia, there are thousands of Qurans flushed down the toilet every single year.
You gotta listen. The equivalent of what you're telling me is that love can be flushed into the toilet. No, it can't.
No.
So can't the attribute
No.
of God.
No.
God's mercy,
No.
God's
You've missed the
attribute
point
of
entirely.
Quran can't be flushed down
No,
the toilet.
and what you've
These are two
missed,
different things.
and what you've missed is that we Christians don't say that the divinity defecates. We Christians don't say that the divinity sleeps. We Christians don't say that the divinity dies.
So you say that Jesus is an attribute of
What? No, we're not saying that either.
So
Our religions are totally different, bro. And
for me,
yeah, but
personally,
one
as
second,
a
one second,
Muslim,
one
it
second.
doesn't make
Oh, one
sense
second.
for God to come
One
down.
second, bro. If this
As a human.
conversation is going to work, it needs to be that I can speak without you interrupting me, and you can speak without you interrupting me.
Well, we're having a discussion.
Right,
You
but
can
the
interrupt
thing
me
is,
as well, and we can hear each other.
if every time I try to speak and give an answer, you interrupt, then I just start doing that to you. The whole conversation breaks down, and then the whole thing becomes, rather than a polite conversation that's nice, it becomes an impolite conversation that gets awkward. So let's avoid that.
Because I forget the point
Let's
that
avoid
you
that.
say. It's like the translation.
So
I forgot.
the thing
I was
is,
gonna ask you a question.
the thing is, you should listen then to what I'm saying. So what I actually said was, the divinity does not change into a humanity. The humanity is created, and the humanity operates in creation. Okay? And it is not confused with the divinity, it is not mingled with the divinity, it is not changed by the divinity, and it is not changing the divinity. So when we say Christ goes to the toilet, we're talking about a human body, a humanity that goes to the toilet, that has the person of God in that flesh. It is the human that sleeps, the human that goes to the toilet, the human that dies, the humanity. Yeah?
So he's
It's not
God
two
in that
persons.
moment.
It's not two persons.
It's not God in that moment.
No,
He's
it's
using
the
toilet.
person, right? There's only one divine person. So the one divine person fills both the humanity and the divine nature. Let me give you an analogy to help you. Maybe a picture will help you.
Okay, but can I ask you?
Yeah, you can, because I don't think you're listening.
Well,
Go on, what's your question?
listen, I'm trying my best to
Yeah.
understand. Like,
What's
I
your
see
question?
that you're getting a little bit angry, but like,
It's just that
I'm
I'm
trying-
saying something and then you just move on to the and
But I'm not. I
go
haven't
on.
even asked
Okay,
my question.
go on.
Listen, I'm trying my best to be sincere and understand what
Yeah.
you're saying. I'm genuinely interested on how you guys
Sure.
create your belief about this. Because for me, looking out, it doesn't make sense. So now I'm here today to try to understand.
Okay,
To see,
okay.
is there a point of view that can make sense?
Yeah.
So my question is, when he's like using the toilet, in that moment, is he God?
Right. So when he's using the toilet, is he God? Yes. But is it the divine that is going to the toilet? No.
Okay.
So let me use the analogy. Let me use the analogy. If I take a Quran, right, and I flush it down the toilet, like thousands of Qurans in Saudi Arabia get flushed down the toilet every year.
I have to keep telling you that it's not the physical Quran.
You see, you're not listening, are you? I'm literally answering your question.
But you keep using the same
But the point is,
example,
I'm trying to answer. You talk about being sincere. I'm trying to answer your question, and when I try to answer your question, you interrupt. So let me answer your question. Okay? So it's like the Quran. Like there are thousands of Qurans that get flushed down the toilet every single year in Saudi Arabia. You would not say, because you do not believe, that the material book or the ink on the paper is the speech, the word of Allah. You think that the paper is created and the ink is created, and what is flushed down the toilet is created paper and created ink. Okay? In exactly the same way, we believe that when Christ goes to the toilet, what sits on the toilet is created, what enters the toilet is created, and what is flushed away is created. What is not needing to go to the toilet, what is not being defecated, what is not being flushed away is any divinity. Now, let me just push this out so you fully understand it. Good. Let me finish my point. I'm landing. Let me finish my point. I'm landing. Let me finish my point. I'm landing. Because if I took the Quran out in my bag and I started ripping up the Arabic pages of it, you would get angry and upset, because even though you don't believe the ink or the paper are the actual Kalam al-Allah, you do believe that in some sense this is divine. Why? Because in some sense it has. No, Muslims all the time get upset when people destroy the Quran.
Well, I'll tell you why.
Are you saying that you don't get upset if someone defecates on a Quran or stands on a Quran or spits on a Quran?
I don't believe that
Why?
that Quran is divine.
What? No, I never said it did. I never said you did.
These are mutually exclusive.
Never said you did.
You just did. You said that.
I said in some sense. I never said it was.
That book is in no way divine.
So so explain to me why you get upset if someone desecrates a Quran.
Because you gotta understand the Quran. When you have the Quran, obviously you can recite from it.
Yeah.
Right?
And is that recitation created?
I think from what I've heard from some scholars, it most likely is. Like I've heard two different views, but I need to get more knowledge about that. But I think that it's probably uncreated when you recite it.
But the words are created. The sounds are created. Your hearing is created. The chemicals in your brain that translate a sound into a word, they're all created. So everything about this process is a created thing.
But the actual recitation, the recitation itself, you know how it's not the Quran, it's not the physical book, but the recitation, I think that's what's uncreated when you say this. But at the same time, your recitation is created.
Right. But the point is, there is no recitation without creation.
Yeah,
Fact.
Because humans can't recite the
Exactly.
Quran. But that doesn't mean the Quran won't exist.
Right, and this is my point, is what you're doing there is you're saying that in some way, something that is created sits alongside something that is uncreated, and even though I can do things...
And you're imposing that on Christ's body.
Let me finish.
On his, I
Let me finish.
Your point.
Let me finish.
But,
and even though we can do something to the created thing, it in no way affects the divine thing. And I'm saying in the same way, when Christ takes to himself the humanity without confusing, mingling, changing, either the divine or the human natures, something can happen to the created humanity of Christ that does not affect the divinity of Christ. Do you understand it now?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
now perhaps we can advance the conversation.
Yeah, so now can I reply to that?
Yeah, go on.
So I think that you do have a point, notwithstanding that I find it very stretched. So I understand what you mean. You're saying is basically that when Christ uses the restroom, that this is part of the created, but the uncreated rests within the other parts, like as an attribute of God, the way that you kind of made the analogy of the Quran. So I understand that. But the issue I have is that a human being is a being. and his words are an attribute of that human. The same way the Quran, God is a being, and his words are an attribute of him. So, but when it's in a different human being, then you can't apply that same analogy. Does that make sense? So like when you're talking to me, the words that are coming out of your mouth to me are an attribution of you. They're an attribute of you. So that's in the same way that the words of the Quran are an attribute of God, his speech. So you can't impose that where you have two different human beings and say that this one can be an attribute of this one through albeit through some divine intervention. Because when you have a human being, we take it as that is a being in itself.
But I don't see how any of this. No, well, no, not really, because I don't see, unless you're trying to suggest that as a Christian I believe in two beings in Christ. Or is that what you think I believe? That I believe that there are two beings in Christ, a human being and a divine being.
Yeah.
Right. But do you believe that I believe in two persons, like a divine person and a human person in Jesus?
Like,
is that what you think?
Do you believe in the Trinity to begin with?
Yeah, we believe in the Trinity, of course.
Yeah,
every Christian believes in the Trinity.
Do you believe this one is divine, this one's divine?
So what's that got? Your analogy has got no connection to anything yet that I've said. I don't understand the connection.
Let me just repeat it.
So try again.
So the way that the speech, so God, when the Quran is his speech, and so the speech is an attribute of God. The same way that when you speak to me, your speech is an attribute of you as a human being. The same cannot be said of different human beings, different beings.
So I'm sorry, the connection between one and the other, I don't understand. What are you trying to say? Because what I've pointed out to you is that what happens to a material nature and what happens to a divine nature don't affect one another in your religion and in my religion.
I don't agree with that.
I mean,
the Quran is the speech of God. Do you understand that your speech is an attribute of you?
Yes.
But in no way is it possible for there to be another human being that's an attribute of you.
But we're not.
Even if you
so
were divine.
hold on one second. We're not saying that the humanity is, as it were, an attribute of the person. What we're saying is that the person fully dwells in the humanity.
So in that sense, when you say that Christ is not an attribute of God, it does not mirror.
Well, what do you mean by Christ there?
Like Jesus as in God?
Yeah, the person or the nature? The person. There's only one person.
So what I'm telling you
and
is
he fills. So allow me to use an analogy to explain what I'm saying
though,
here.
It does not mirror the way the Quran works.
It's a shame that we've moved off the original topic because it would have been a nice conversation.
Can I just?
No. Let me just go on.
Doesn't mirror the Quran.
No, I disagree. Wrong. I completely disagree with you because.
So do you say it does or it doesn't?
What I'm saying to you is that you're trying to create a double standard.
Well, can I just ask?
No.
Do you think it mirrors the Quran?
What I'm trying to say.
Can I just get an answer to that?
I'm going to answer that question.
Well, can you just say
I'm
yes
going
or no?
to answer that question.
Just so I understand
I'm
how
going.
you're
I'm going to answer that question. You're creating a double standard in which you're saying that we have a rule in our religion that works for us, but you can't have that same rule that works for you. And what I'm saying to you, and what I'm saying to you, and what I'm saying, because it has got nothing to do with what I said.
Yes, it does. It's how it's applicable to God.
How is it applicable to what I said?
I understand what you said.
So what did I say?
From what I understand, you're trying to mirror the way that the Quran works. And
no, hold on one second.
It goes into creation, and it's part of the creation of our recitation.
Let's just be clear about something.
But these two mirrors have nothing to do.
Can we just get our history correct?
Can
we just get our history correct? Because Christians believe this long before Muslims came up with their doctrines. It isn't that we're mirroring Islam. It's that Islam is mirroring Christianity. We Christians had this belief before Islam ever
in Judaism,
existed.
For example, the coming down of the Holy Scripture.
No, we had this belief about the incarnation centuries before Muhammad. It isn't that we're mirroring you. Your beliefs are mirroring our beliefs. Our beliefs historically came first, and Muslims are borrowing what Christians said about the incarnation to explain how a material book can be called the Quran but not be the Kalam al-Allah.
So mirroring the Bible, like the scripture coming
down?
No,
mirroring exactly Jesus Christ.
In what way?
Because in Christianity we believe Jesus Christ is the word of Allah. We believe that Jesus Christ is the word of God.
Well,
it says in the Gospel of John.
He's a being, he's not a speech.
No.
Words are different.
No. Again, you're assuming that what is true in your religion has to be true in our religion, and I'm saying it's a different religion.
I'm using logic and telling you that two different people
Your logic is flawed.
Let me just tell you
Go
something. Two different people.
Which people are you talking about?
This is just its own hypothetical situation.
Okay.
Two different people are different from a person with speech.
So what has that got to do with what I said?
Can I just finish?
Yeah.
When you speak in the production of speech, it is an attribute of you. Do you agree?
Yes.
Your speech is not separate from you. The same way the speech of God in the Quran is not different from him himself, because it's his production of speech. It's his attribute that way. Same way as we humans, when we talk, our talking is an attribute of us.
Yeah.
What you're trying to do is you're taking that and somehow trying to make it similar to two different beings, a human being and God.
Yeah.
These cannot work. They can't be the same thing.
So that has
the same
not.
way that
So,
speech has to
so
do
my
with
question,
human
my
beings.
question to you, when you talked about
That's my problem.
so when you said two human beings,
as a hypothetical situation.
right? But what that has got nothing to do with what I said.
Because for me, God and a human, the attribute connection cannot be made.
But you still have not addressed what I've said.
Can you repeat?
So firstly, I want to, in your analogy that you said is purely hypothetical. Obviously, you was giving this as some kind of criticism of what I said. So, in what way are these two human beings connected to what I said? In your hypothetical situation.
The two human beings would be, as an example, two beings. Let's not say human beings. One being is God and one being is a human. And you're saying these two can be the same as in an attributable way, the same way the Quran, the production of speech of God.
Are you using the word person and human being in your argument interchangeably?
Being, like just as God is a being.
My question is, firstly, if you don't understand the term, I'm happy to explain it. But are you saying, in your analogy, are you using the words human being and personhood interchangeably?
I'm trying to use being.
But I need to clarify. Are you saying that every human being has a personhood, and therefore personhood and human being are interchangeable?
In a way, a human being is a being.
So let me clarify something, because
like they have a will.
So let me clarify something. Let me clarify
make
something.
sense, though?
Yes, it makes sense. Let me clarify something to you, because what I'm trying to point out to you is that when we Christians talk about Christ having two natures, we only see one person in that Christ with the two natures.
I understand.
Right? It's like a coin. You know, if I've got a gold coin, it has two faces. When you look at one face, it doesn't look like the other face. When you flip it around and you look at the other face, it doesn't look like the first face. But the coin, the gold, goes from one face to the other face and fills both completely. When it comes to the incarnation, it's the person of Christ is like the gold. It fills both faces. But the human face and the divine face never touch, except in the person.
I understand.
Right?
Okay.
So what happens, so if I scratch one face, I do scratch the gold, but what I don't scratch is the other face. The other face is totally untouched.
Okay, I understand.
Right?
So now, bear with me here, okay? So a being has a will, right? So the difference, I'm gonna, for the sake of comparison, because you brought it up first,
I think though you're trying to
just let me finish.
But you're not sticking to the.
Okay, let me finish, and then you can
Go
criticize and return. If I'm diverting, I'm not trying.
I feel you're moving on to a different part of the argument.
It's not.
Yeah,
no, it's the same thing. So, a being has a will, right? For us, God has a will.
Yeah.
And when you say human being, automatically has a will.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So now you have two wills.
Correct.
In the Quran, in the example of Quran and God, speech cannot have a will. It's not possible.
Yep.
Your speech is a production of you. It's not a will.
Right.
So that's why speech can be an attribute of God, and they're the same.
Right.
You can't divide them.
So
but here, when you have a human being and you have God, and they both have a will. This is divisible. They can't be the same thing.
Firstly,
can I just say, does that make sense to you? So
I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, so I'm going to address it completely.
So
I'm going to address it. I'm going to address it completely. So, firstly, right, going back to the analogy of the coin, right, the human nature.
The coin doesn't make sense.
No, it does.
It's two wills. You can't have a will into one coin.
You see, if you just interrupt me again,
sorry, go
right, then I'll just start interrupting you, and then you'll say, "But let me finish. Let me finish. Let me finish." So let me finish. Yeah. Don't insist that you can finish, but then don't let me finish. Doesn't work like that.
Go ahead.
Right? So in terms of the analogy, we Christians assert that Christ has two wills, a human will and a divine will. Going back to the analogy of the coin, because remember what we're talking about is the fact that you can affect one nature, but it doesn't affect the other nature. That's actually what we're talking about. And so if using the analogy of the coin, remembering that the gold of the coin represents the personhood of Christ, and the two faces represent the natures of Christ, his divine and his human nature. If I get a sharp knife and I scratch one side of that coin, so I totally mutilate the image, right? Both the gold, i.e. the person, and one face, i.e. one nature, has been affected by the scratching. But if you flip the coin over, the gold, that is the one person, and the one face, that is the divine nature, is unscratched, untarnished, and looks perfect. Okay, so my analogy does stand up. What's the problem is that you haven't engaged with the analogy. It's all right. What's happened is you've totally ignored the analogy. But here's where your double standard appears. Because I said to you that you have exactly the same concept in your religion. But you said, no we don't, it's different. Because if I take a Quran and I stand on it, or I spit in it, or I flush it down the toilet, you would be angry that I've desecrated a book, and you'd be right to, because that's rude and it's wrong. But you wouldn't say that I have been able to damage the divine word of Allah. So you're trying to create a double standard where you say that it is impossible for the divine and the human natures to sit together, that one happens to one nature but not the other. In Christianity, you're saying that's impossible, but you're saying it can happen in Islam, and I simply reject your double standard. If you can have that rule in Islam, we can have that rule in Christianity. And to the point, we're not copying Muslims. Christians had this belief centuries before Muslims. Muslims borrowed our understanding of the incarnation to talk about their Quran.
So the issue is, the reason I'm not addressing the coin, because it does not make sense.
Explain why it doesn't make sense. No, you didn't. You interrupted. But notice you're protesting. I told you you'd protest if I interrupted you.
But I didn't interrupt you.
But you did interrupt me.
I said I understand.
I had to insist upon you not interrupting.
Okay.
Do you see how being interrupted is annoying?
Well, obviously.
Does that mean you won't interrupt me going forward? When I speak next time, will you not interrupt me?
I won't interrupt.
Right. So here's the end of my interruption. Right? Saying that my analogy does not make sense is not saying my analogy does not make sense is not the same as a refutation. Give a refutation of the analogy. Go on.
Okay, so I understand we can't interrupt each other. I understand. I'll try my best. So yeah, I mean, like, so when I said the coin doesn't make sense, I was gonna go and explain it, but you kind of interrupted me.
Oh, is that wrong? If you don't interrupt me, I won't interrupt you.
Okay, so the reason is because I find it very, what's the word? Like, I find it within myself, I can already object to the fact that you can't fuse two wills into a coin. A coin has nothing to do when you look at it in wills. Now, first, I want to address your point that that our concept of the Quran is similar to your concept, which is completely false. And I've already explained this to you multiple times, but you seem to miss the point. I gave you a logical example of human beings, okay? When a human being produces speech, that speech does not have a will, it's an attribute of that human being. Does that make sense? To be honest, okay.
I'm listening.
I'm starting to forget now, but when a human being produces speech, that speech is an attribute of that human being. Do you agree with me?
Yes.
Now, when you have two things that have wills, those things, my argument is, cannot be fused together. And so you have to show me how you can have two beings that each one has its own will, can be fused together in a coin, like the example that you gave me. Now that's up to you to show me. For me, the Quran, it's a production of speech. So when you produce speech, it's an attribute of yourself, and it's not a will or a being. That's why it has nothing to do with the Christian concept, where you have two beings that you're trying to fuse together. Does that make sense?
Does make sense.
So now I give it.
I don't agree with it.
It.
So firstly,
you don't have to agree with it. It's my opinion.
So firstly, if the human person fully fills a human nature,
okay,
right, then that means it possesses a human will.
Yes.
If it fully possesses a divine nature, it also possesses a divine will.
Yeah.
The unity can't be in the natures, and it isn't, and we don't claim that it is.
What about the wills?
The wills are in the wills are not united in the natures, because that would entail the contradiction you're talking about. So we're not saying that the wills are united in the nature.
Okay.
Right?
So
we're saying that they are united in the person. Going back to my analogy, which does make sense, and simply saying it doesn't prove it. The gold represents the person. The gold goes fully to the first face and goes fully to the second face. Each of those natures is fully possessed of the person. So it has a human will, that Christ has a human will, and he has a divine will. But you said that the Quran does not have a will. But let me finish. You're interrupting. Remember what we said, what we agreed? So your own hadiths state, right, listen, bear with me, on the day of resurrection, according to your hadith,
testify for you on the day of the judgment.
It says this about your Quran. Abdullah ibn Amir reported the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, said that on the day of resurrection, yeah, the Quran will say, "O Lord, I prevented him from sleeping during the night, so let me intercede for him." So the Quran is speaking to Allah and interceding to Allah on behalf of the believer. So the Quran is interceding, it has a will, and it is speaking back to Allah. That is what your hadith say.
But don't move on to another point. Let me answer that hadith. Okay?
Oh, no. You don't get to control the conversation.
But
I remember.
You can't move on.
No, hold on. It is on film that we started talking about spirituality and about motives.
Yeah, but now
and I said, it's a shame you're wanting to move the conversation on from this topic. So you don't get to control the conversation. It is a free-flowing conversation.
Yeah,
Go on. So reply to this. Yeah.
So I just want to get it clear. It's okay, because you're also moving from point to point. So we're just having a
That's fine. So you can't tell me not to move on.
Well, it's because I just want to have the opportunity to respond to the hadith. Is that not fair?
Go on.
So if you want to say no, and then we can end the conversation.
No. I'm just saying you don't get to dictate the conversation.
I don't want to dictate. I just want to have a normal.
Then let's do that.
But I asked you to let me respond to the hadith. That's basically what I was trying to do.
Go on.
So basically, you have to understand what the hadith means. It's not that the Quran itself will testify. Do you know what will testify? Your recitation of the Quran. The fact, how does the Quran keep you up from sleeping? It's because you stayed up and recited the Quran. So what will actually testify for you is the action of you reciting the Quran and doing good deeds instead of sleeping.
Okay, can I reply to that?
Your recitation testifies for you.
Can I reply to that?
It's not the physical book comes on the day of it doesn't have its own will.
Can I reply to that?
Your own, you can, but can I just...
you land your point. And notice I'm letting you land your point.
Well, and I told you can respond. I didn't say I'm going to move on to another topic and not let you respond.
Yeah.
So your recitation of the Quran is what will testify for you. It has nothing to do with let's say, you can't understand it in the way of like the physical book will come on the day of judgment and say, oh, I like, what's your name?
Bob.
Nice to meet you, Bob.
Nice to meet you, bro.
So it can't come on the day of judgment and say, I like this guy, Bob, and I want him to go into heaven. That's not what it means. What it means is that Bob, as a Muslim, he stayed up in the night and recited the Quran. Because of his actions testify for him.
Okay.
That's what it means.
Can I reply to that?
And that's what we understand, and that's what the majority of scholars say.
Can I reply to that?
And we say this hadith all the time.
Right, now I'm going to reply to that.
Go ahead.
Right? The first problem with your argument is that is not what the text says at all. Right? That's the first problem with your argument. Do not interrupt me. The first problem with your argument is that is exactly not what the text say. exactly what the text say is that the Quran will intercede for you. It does not say the action of reciting will intercede for you. It says the Quran. So that's the first problem. The second problem is, if what you're saying is true, then that means that Muslims or Muhammad himself has labeled an action, a human action, as a divine attribute. He has called a human action a divine attribute. Why? Because the text says the Quran will intercede for you. No, do not interrupt.
No, just repeat.
I literally repeated it twice, but I will repeat it a third time. The second problem is that if your argument is true, then Muhammad has committed shirk because he has given the divine attribute, its name, to a created action, if your argument is true, which is shirk. Thirdly, the other problem is that it also introduces another shirk, because if the action of recitation, right? If the action of recitation of the Quran, right? It means that you are reciting the Quran, but all of these things are created, then you have something that is created that is like something that is uncreated. Because, why? Because Allah's speech is uncreated, and Allah is not like anything that He has created, including all of His attributes, but your recitation is created, and your recitation is an exact facsimile of the divine speech, which means that you have something that is uncreated looking exactly like something that is created, i.e., I can say recite the words of the Quran, and that means I am reciting the words of Allah. So my created speech is an exact representation of Allah's uncreated speech. So your first problem is that is exactly not what the text says. You said exactly something that the text did not say. Your second problem is that if that is true, then the name of something created is being given the name of something uncreated. And the third problem is that something that is created is exactly the same as something that is uncreated. Your speech and uncreated speech.
So if I miss a point, can you just tell me?
Those are the 3 points, yeah.
Because I tend to forget a lot, so...
Yeah.
And also you said a lot, so I need to like stay in touch, but...
Okay.
So, let me just try to remember. Okay, so here's something that I've forgotten about. One of the scholars said that when you recite God's speech, the Quran, your recitation is not the attribute of God. Your recitation is the repeat of the speech. So let's say, for example, you said something and I repeat what you said. What I repeated is not you saying that exactly. So it's not your attribute. It's my repeating that attribute. So now it becomes my production of speech. Does that make sense?
Yep, it does.
And so how we view it in the Quran, in the context of the Islamic discourse, is that when you repeat the words of God, it's a good deed. You're doing it, you get a good deed for repeating it.
Yep.
And so what that hadith means is that your repeating of the words of God and applying it in your life and staying up at night and reading the Quran, that will come to testify for you on the Day of Judgment. You're viewing it in a literal sense of like, oh no, the Quran itself will come and vouch for people and things like that. But you're missing a core part of the hadith. And if we go back to it in the text, I'll explain it to you exactly in the specifics of it, is that it even says that it's because it kept him up from sleeping. Now, you have to ask, how did it keep him up from sleeping? Did the Quran itself come down as a book and talk to the guy as a, like, you know how Jesus comes down? No, it's the person willingly chose to recite the Quran, repeat the words of God to get the good deeds, and that prevented him from sleeping. So, i.e., his actions are the ones that resulted in that vouch or in that testification that he should be saved from the hellfire. So his actions is what is witnessing for him on the Day of Judgment, not the actual Quran coming down as a person. You get it? So that's in relation to the hadith itself. What was your second point?
So let me just come back on that point. So the point is, firstly, what's identified is the Quran. It doesn't say the action. Doesn't say the action.
You get it from the when it says that it kept him up from sleeping.
Yeah, let's just look at some hadiths, right?
Can I take a look at it?
The second point is that if what you're saying is true, then something that is created is being called by something uncreated. The Quran.
One more time.
Something created is being called by the name of something uncreated. So a created thing, i.e. the action of recitation.
You mean the action is being called
uncreated? Is being called the Quran.
Okay,
and the Quran is uncreated.
Yeah.
Right? So is it shirk to call something created by the names of the uncreated?
One more time, the last question.
Is it shirk to call something created by the names of something uncreated?
So as in calling the action the Quran?
Yes.
See, you're misunderstanding it and thinking that the Quran itself is the action. The Quran itself, the production of speech.
That's not the question.
What's it?
Your argument is that something created is the one interceding back to Allah.
Yeah, his actions.
Right? That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Is it right to call something created by the names of the uncreated?
But the thing is, the action itself is not being called the Quran.
It is literally being called the Quran. Yeah, I'll show you. It's literally being called the Quran.
Just so I recall the hadith.
I don't even know why you're arguing the point. I literally read it to you. You heard it say, it says, read the Quran, right? So you're reading the Quran, for it will come on the day of resurrection interceding for its companions, right? Now, the point is, you're being told to read the Quran, right? Because the thing that you're reading...
Wait, one more time.
Let me finish.
Can you go back?
You're interrupting me.
What do you say?
You're interrupting me. Unfortunately, we get these hecklers. You've just best to ignore them.
What did he say?
They just interrupt. It's just a thing that they do. So, in terms of this Quran, it says, look, right? It says in Sahih Muslim 804, narrated by Abu Umamah al-Bahila, said, I heard the Messenger of Allah say, read the Quran, for it will come. This is my point.
It is reading the Quran.
Right, listen, and
it's not the Quran itself.
Is it right to call something created by the names of the uncreated?
Okay, can I respond?
I'm asking you that question.
Ask me the question as soon as I make just one 10-second point. Read the Quran, for it is reading the Quran, not the Quran itself.
Now answer the question I actually asked.
Do you understand?
No, now answer the question I actually asked. You see, you're not even listening, bro.
You said
I'll
if
say it again.
something is created, can you call it uncreated? I know your question.
So the Quran, so the thing is
reading the Quran.
Yes, and it's been called the Quran.
Read
because
the Quran,
the Quran, listen, fasting and the Quran will intercede for a person on the day of resurrection.
Are you going to say fasting?
Are you now going to answer my question?
Yeah, I will answer. But you got to give me. You
so
let me
answer my question.
Okay, can I respond now?
Do you know what my question is?
Yes.
Repeat my question back to me.
Can you call a created being uncreated?
Answer that question.
Okay, but before I answer it, I have to establish the context of which you're trying to ask that question, because it's very deceiving, by the way. Fasting and the Quran will intercede for you on the day of judgment. Let me finish.
No, you've interrupted me consistently. You don't get to insist on letting me finish. No, you don't get to do that when you interrupt me.
Are you going to let me respond?
But you interrupt me.
Okay, but I would like to respond.
No, but you interrupt me, so you can't say that.
So, I'm asking for
your permission to speak. But you interrupt me.
If you don't want to give me
So what I'm saying though, listen to my argument again. No. Listen to my argument again, because you haven't heard it. Yes, you can respond when I've restated the argument. Because your argument is, and this is the difference between listening and responding, is that you're saying that the action is what intercedes for you, right? So taking that position, my question to you is it right to call a created thing by the names of the uncreated? That's the question.
What the Prophet did, and yes,
it literally does it right here.
Yeah,
fasting and the Quran will intercede for a person.
I have to ask, will you let me respond?
Yeah, go on.
Can I
respond.
get at least 30 seconds?
Yeah, but you interrupt me, bro, and
I still need to work on that.
Yeah, you do need to work on that. You do need to work on that. But go on.
Perhaps in the future, if we talk,
Yeah,
I'll be
go
better
on.
at it.
Yeah, hopefully, go on.
So it seems mind-boggling that you're like fasting and the Quran. Do you think fasting is like? Do you think it's a will? Like it's some kind of being?
That's not the question.
Let me finish right here. Okay. So, like literally, when the Hadith says fasting and the Quran, it's literally clear what it means by that. Fasting is an action, and the Quran, i.e., your recitation of it.
That's still not the question.
That's what. What do you mean that's not?
You've still not answered my question.
Your question is, can you call a created thing uncreated?
So you do know the question.
My answer to your question is no, you can't do that. But
Thank
that
you.
is not what the Prophet is doing, and
Right.
that is the point.
So now let me read.
The Prophet is not calling the action uncreated.
No, I didn't say that.
Yeah, you did.
No, I didn't.
You said when he said
I did not
the Quran,
say.
You're saying he's calling the Quran will come as the action, and that's uncreated. That's
No,
what you're implying.
no. What I'm
That's not true.
no. What you stated just then is not what I
Fasting
stated.
on the Quran, as in fasting, you fasting on Ramadan, and
just-
Quran, as in you reciting the Quran, will testify for you as in your action.
So you don't believe you can call something created by the uncreated?
Yeah, like I can't call you. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all right.
I can't call you an uncreated being. Obviously, you're a human being. You're
No. I didn't say that. You see, you've subtly
This
changed
applies
my
to
question.
everything.
No. You're subtly changing my question, and so that means that you don't want to engage with my question because you're changing my question.
Well, that's what you.
What I said was, can you call something that is created the names of the uncreated?
Like the Quran is not a name of uncreated.
Right.
Do you understand that?
Okay,
Like,
so let's look at this.
When I say the word Quran,
Let's look
is
at
it
this.
uncreated?
Let's
that
look at
word?
this.
That doesn't make any sense.
So let's look at this, right? So,
But yeah, no, you can't do that. By the way.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
Not the name. Not you can't say something is uncreated when it's created.
Is the Quran the speech of Allah?
Yeah, the speech itself is uncreated, not the word Quran.
So the speech of Allah is uncreated.
Yes.
And what do you call the speech of Allah?
We call it the book. We call it the Quran.
You call the speech of Allah the Quran. So you've got a name for the speech of Allah,
So if I call this the Quran, I can say the Quran is created.
right?
Does that make
No,
sense?
hold on. Are you following
But
my
when you
logic?
refer to the
Now
speech-
notice you're interrupting.
But, when I reply to you, you're getting your answer.
Okay. So the point is, right, now let me speak without you interrupting. Let's see if you can do better like you said you wanted to.
I will
Right?
try my best.
You try your best, please. Yeah?
Because you get these urges.
You try
so
your
I can
best.
respond to a
You,
point.
you try your best, okay? Because you protest every time I interrupt you. So
Well, try to
the
be more
speech,
patient with me.
the speech of Allah you call the Quran. The speech of Allah is uncreated. That
Right.
means the speech of Allah, which is uncreated, has a name, the Quran.
But the name
But
isn't
you're saying that when Muhammad said, fasting and the Quran will intercede for you, you're saying that the Quran that is referred to here is the created action.
yeah.
But the created action has a name. According to Muhammad, he's calling it the Quran.
Right.
But
And
that is the name
and so-
of the uncreated
Right.
divine speech.
And so
you said
Yeah.
that you couldn't do that because it was shirk.
Yeah, you can't call something that's created uncreated.
Thank you.
However,
No, I didn't say that. You've changed what I said again.
But the name is fine.
What
you
I've
can
said.
do that with the name.
So you can use the names
my
of
point.
divine
Here's why.
speech for
Yes,
created
here's why.
things. Okay.
Because someone, a layman, can come and say that this fence is the Quran.
Yeah. And
If
is it?
If he does that, right?
And is it?
It doesn't. When we say then we can say that his reference to the Quran is created. That there's no shirk there.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with the Hadith. What the Prophet meant by the Quran, and it's especially clear when it's referenced and the fasting.
Yep.
He's talking about the action.
Yep.
So you can call the action by that name. It's not problematic. Just if I, as a Muslim, call this, I want to call this fence Quran.
Yeah.
That's not shirk.
You don't think that's shirk?
No, because
Okay.
the name itself is not the speech itself.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So
that's where
one
you're
second.
having troubles.
Okay. No. I think
understand that?
I do get what you're saying, but I don't think you're fully engaging with what I'm saying. But let's move on to the third point.
But as long as you
Let's
understand
let's move on. I
that's my
do
point.
understand your argument, but I don't think your argument properly addressed what I said. I think you ignored what I said.
No, I think I addressed the Hadith and what you
Well,
said.
people
very
can make their
clearly.
own mind up. So let's move on to the third point. The third point is that it says, and bearing in mind I'm engaging with your response to my initial argument, right? The third point is that it says fasting and the Quran will intercede for you. Now, dealing with your argument that when it says the Quran, It's not talking about the divine speech, it's talking about your recitation.
Yeah.
Right? So I have engaged with what you have said. The problem with your argument is that now what you're saying is something that is created is like one of the attributes that is uncreated. Why? Because your speech, when you recite the Quran, right, so long as obviously you're reciting it perfectly, people will say that is the speech of Allah.
It's not. It's the repeating of the speech of Allah.
Which
it itself is not.
But the point is, is it not the words of Allah?
When you, Bob, say something and I repeat it,
yes,
what you said is not it's my saying is not a production of
okay,
you.
I'll prove my point with a living example.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I will prove my
it's
point.
The same thing with the
I'll
Quran.
prove my point with a living example. Okay, repeat exactly what I say back to me. Your jumper is green.
Okay.
Repeat it back.
What? My jumper is green.
No, I didn't say that.
Your jumper is green.
You're struggling with this.
Your jumper is green.
Right. So my words and your words are exact reflections of one another, are they not?
Yeah, but it's not.
Right.
It's not.
So if
my
you,
speech is not a production of your speech.
so my point, but you've got to listen to the point I'm making. You have just demonstrated on camera that our speech is an exact mirror image. Let's do it again. Your jumper is green.
Okay.
Repeat back. Repeat back. Repeat back.
Your jumper is green.
Right.
When I say that,
But the point is, our two speeches, even though yours is an attribute
but
of
Bob,
you.
you're missing
No,
the
let me.
point.
No, you're interrupting always. Right. But you complain when I interrupt you. It's a shame that I have to keep teaching you this lesson.
it's okay. We're interrupting each other.
That's fine. And it's good humoured, so I don't really mind it. But my point is, you've just demonstrated that our language is an exact mirror reflection. So if you're saying that
Yeah, but can I- about that point,
I'm going to finish.
just
No,
one
I'm going to
second.
finish.
Hold
No,
on.
I'm going to finish. No, I'm going to
Bob,
finish.
because-
No, I am going to
gotta-
finish.
you
So the
gotta-
Quran, if you're saying that when it refers to the Quran, it's referring to the created speech, well, that created speech is an exact mirror image of the uncreated.
Yeah, so
but the
what?
Quran says,
So what?
the Quran says that there is nothing in creation that is like unto him, and when it says that, it means his attributes as well as his essence.
Right?
So now address the point.
So when you, let's say you're a divine being, okay? And
I'm
you,
not.
And you, just hypothetical situation.
Let's just say God is a divine being. Let's
Well-
just use
well,
God.
yeah, but,
Let's
it's-
just use God.
Okay.
When
Well,
Allah
it's-
speaks,
Okay, so God as a being,
Yes.
when he produces speech, that's
Yes.
his attribute.
yes.
Just because I repeated that speech doesn't mean my speech has now become a divine attribute of God.
I never said that.
Does that make sense?
You see, you're
That's
still
what
not listening.
that's what
I
you're-
did not
that's-
say
is-
that.
That is what you were trying to imply.
No, I didn't. You see,
And
you're
so
not
that's why
listening. No,
my
I didn't say
recitation
that.
of the Quran is not an uncreated. It's not. I'm not.
I did
vesting
not say
attributes
that.
of God.
I'll repeat
That's
to you
my
my
point.
argument again. Right? What I said was, the Quran says Allah is not like anything in his creation.
Yeah.
Right? If Allah is not like anything in his creation, right, that also includes all of his attributes. If you're saying that your recitation of the Quran intercedes for you on the day of judgment,
Because of the action.
and it is the action that is speaking for you, then that means your recitation of the Quran is a mirror image of Allah's speech. In other words,
Where do you get that
your
implication?
created
That's a
speech
superimposition.
is a mirror image of Allah's divine speech.
Right. I don't understand what's wrong with that. You're superimposing.
Is
the fact-
Allah like anything in his creation?
You're superimposing.
Answer I'm going to explain to you why it's wrong.
No. What
Is
you're-
Allah like
here's-
anything in his
but
creation?
Here's the thing you gotta understand. You're superimposing the fact that if I repeat God's words, whatever I'm saying is divine.
No, I didn't say that.
Therefore,
No,
because-
I actually said
therefore-
it was created.
Therefore, because
I did
God
not
is,
say that.
is nothing like His creation.
did not say
the
that.
The fact that the recitation is divine, therefore it
I
contradicts
did not
the fact
say that.
God is nothing
I
like.
did not
Isn't
say
your
that.
point?
No, you see, again, you haven't listened, so I'll repeat my point
I
again.
did listen, and I think.
So try to
people can
listen.
understand
So
that
try to listen to my point. So the Quran says that Allah is not like anything that He has created. So He's not like anything that He's created. But you're saying that your recitation of the Quran is created,
Right.
and it is that action that will intercede for you on the Day of Judgment.
Right.
But that recitation, for it to be a recitation of the Quran, of Allah's speech, means that it must be a mirror image of His speech.
Right.
Going back to our living example, if I say your jumper is green and you repeat your jumper is green, you have spoke, I have spoke, my speech is an attribute of me, your speech is an attribute of you, but the words your jumper is green are exactly the same. Correct, thank you. So that means that Allah's speech is like something that Allah created.
Okay. So what you're implying
Yes, okay.
is that
Yes, okay.
when someone repeats the words of God, right? It's something similar to or is the same as the attribute of God.
It is a mirror
That's what
image
you're
of
saying.
Allah's words.
So you're saying because God is nothing like what's created.
Well, Allah says that,
can't-
not me.
You can't have that. You can't have someone be able to say things that are the attributes of God. Is what you're implying.
So are you saying that Allah was wrong when he said that he's not like anything in his creation?
I'm trying to understand what you're trying to say.
I think most people who are watching this are going to understand. So my point to you is, I'll state it again, is that Allah says in his Quran, he is not like anything that he has created.
Right.
That includes his attributes, right? But if the recitation of Quran is created, and it's that recitation that speaks for you on the Day of Judgment, and the recitation, for it to be called Quran, it must reflect the words of Allah. So where Allah says Bismillah Rahmanir Rahim, and you say Bismillah Rahmanir Rahim, and forgive my Arabic, I'm not an Arabic speaker.
I understand. So let me
Your
respond to it.
attribute of speech reflects in mirror image Allah's attribute of speech.
Do you know?
Because the words Bismillah Rahman Rahim have been spoken by you, which are created, and Allah, which are uncreated.
All right. So listen up, Bob. You gotta stay with me here.
Go on.
The equivalent of what you're saying is that the fact that mercy, for example, is an attribute of God, and that we're merciful to each other, that is similar to an attribute of God. Therefore, there is something in creation that is similar to Him, and contradicts the fact that there is nothing like Him.
So
That's the equivalent of what you're saying. Is that true?
I mean, it is a problem for Islam, yes.
You see?
It is a problem for Islam.
So now you gotta understand is that the mercy of God is different to our mercy. It's not like when you take the attributes such as the speech of God, simply repeating or doing that thing doesn't mean that you're like God. That doesn't make any sense.
So
you're
you haven't
superimposition.
you haven't actually addressed my point. The whole mercy thing does create another problem, and it creates exactly the same problem, because if you're saying that Allah is not like anything in His creation, right? But Allah has mercy and you have mercy, then you have no point of reference to identify what mercy is to Allah.
Right.
Because Allah is not like anything in His creation.
And so His mercy
But
is
the problem with the speech thing, and here's the problem with the speech thing that I know you've recognized it because I saw you recognize it, is that if I say your jumper is green and you say your jumper is green, we have two attributes of speech, each belonging to two different beings. But the words your jumper is green are identical. So if Allah gives speech that you then recite, and your recitation is created, but Allah's speech is uncreated, then the words, because they are identical, are mirror images of one another. And that means that Allah's attribute of speech is identical to your speech. And that means that Allah is like something in His creation, which contradicts the Quran. So don't refute the argument. Don't flabbergast, don't equivocate, don't use a different example. Deal with my argument.
You're having a hard time understanding the
Really
fact
not.
that when we repeat the words of God,
Yes.
we're not creating something that is similar or is the same as God. What you have to do is you have
You're
to
not
create
creating
something.
anything. Allah's
when
creating
the Quran,
it.
for example, gives a challenge to bring a verse like it, just because you repeat the Quran as it is, it doesn't mean you've brought a verse like it. That's
I
what
didn't
you're
say that.
superimposing.
No, I didn't say that.
You have to create something that's similar to Him in
I
order
didn't
to
say that.
contradict the point that
Nope.
God is nothing like His creation.
So I didn't actually say that.
And you got to understand in Islam,
didn't say
there's
that.
a difference of opinion that your recitation of the Quran, when it comes out as is the production of speech of God,
Yeah.
that could be uncreated. And in that sense, your whole argument falls.
No, it doesn't.
But even if we don't say that, your argument still falls because of the fact that we're simply repeating the words of God. We're not creating something of our own will that is similar to God.
Let me
Does that
reply
make
to that.
sense?
Let me reply
Does
to
that make
that.
sense?
Let me reply to that. The first thing, I need to teach you your own deen.
No,
Because
no,
yes, you do.
just- you
No, because
there's a
you
superimposition
said
that's
we create
filled with
speech.
fault.
You said we create speech, Islamic Aqidah is that Allah creates your speech. You don't create anything. You
That's
don't
not
create
how it works.
anything. No. Allah creates every moment of time. He creates every action.
Right, so if I
Allah
make an
creates your
action-
speech. No, I'm going to finish my point. The argument that I've made, the argument that you are not addressing, and the fact that I keep having to repeat it shows that you're not addressing it, is that because I'm not saying that your speech is of similar eloquence to Allah's speech, because that is what the point of the Quran that you referenced in your reply, and I never made any mention of that whatsoever. What I said was, because remember it's about the Quran's intercession on the Day of Judgment, you said that the Quran's intercession on the Day of Judgment is not actually the Quran, it's the action of reciting the Quran. And I said, fine, let's work with that. If the action of the Quran is what intercedes for you, then that means Allah has created something that is identical to Allah's own speech. If I say,
Okay,
let
we
me
have to
finish,
stop
let me
at that
finish.
point.
No, you
That
don't
is-
get to interrupt. You
that's
don't
not
get
true.
to interrupt. If I say that your jumper is green and you say your jumper is green, even though my attribute of speech is mine and your attribute of speech is yours, the words your jumper is green are identical. And if Allah creates words that are identical to His words, then He has created something identical to something uncreated. And as it is identical to something uncreated, it breaks the Islamic concept, it contradicts what the Quran says when it says Allah is not like anything He has created, because He creates your speech. And if He creates your speech and your speech is identical to His words, then He has created something identical to His eternal speech.
So, as
Do
I
you follow
understand
that
it-
logic?
Yeah, just listen up. As I understand it, you're saying my recitation of the Quran
Is created, yes.
and so God has created something similar to His uncreated attribute of the Quran.
What I'm saying
what
is
you're saying.
there are words in the Quran and there are words that Allah creates when you recite the Quran,
Yeah.
right? The words of the Quran, the kalam of Allah, is uncreated.
Okay.
Your recitation is created. So Allah is creating things in creation that are one-to-one symmetry with His uncreated speech. And I'll prove it to you again. Just repeat my words. Your jumper is
Okay,
green.
we've gone through that 3 times. I've already.
So address the
to be
analogy.
honest, I've already addressed your.
Address
argument,
the
and you
analogy.
keep repeating it.
So
Did
address
you-
the analogy.
What about the? Can you?
Address the analogy. If I say your jumper is green and you say your jumper is green, my speech is an attribute of me, your speech is an attribute of you, but the words your jumper is green are identical words.
But when I say your jumper is green,
Yes.
it's not an attribute of you.
Agreed. And that breaks the radical transcendence that the Quran asserts. The Quran asserts a radical transcendence. It says Allah is not like anything He has created. That includes all of His attributes, including His speech. And yet He creates your recitation, which has a one-to-one symmetry, a mirror image, a perfect replication of the words of Allah.
Okay.
Your silence is appropriate.
No, my silence is because of the fact I've addressed this multiple times and you keep repeating.
Okay, so let's advance
are we-
the argument
are we
then.
Are we gonna continue?
So
this-
let's advance. Let's
I've
return.
already given you 2 points concerning this, and you keep repeating it. So, Bob, I don't.
But your points never addressed what I said,
I
what
do
they did.
address them. You
So
just-
try
you
a
just
third
keep
time
saying-
to address what I've said, because
You just-
so
you
far
keep
I've not
saying-
heard a reply.
I did reply.
I
replied
didn't hear a
multiple
reply.
times. You
Because remember, when you were giving your reply, I said that is not what I said. That is not what I said.
From the
So you
beginning-
subtly
from
changed what
the-
I said and
from the-
replied to a straw man.
The issue is
You changed
the
what I
beginning of
said
the
and you
conversation-
replied to a straw man.
Every time you make a point, I make a response, and you seem to imply that I'm not.
Not
that
every
we're
time.
leaving-
Not
that
every
we're
time.
leaving the point. This
Not
is-
every time. When
So
you
I find-
engage
I
with
find
what
that-
I'm
I
saying,
find that
I reply
unfair.
to your engagement. But so far, in your 2 attempts to reply to this argument, you changed what I said and then replied to what you
I
changed
didn't change
about
what
what.
you said.
So try a third time. Last time. Try again.
Like So if I reply to your point, you need to take it as is and not repeat your argument again.
Go on. Let me hear your reply. A third point.
Unless you have a counter.
Let me hear your third attempt.
For this point, I don't wish to keep repeating.
Okay, so people can.
I think people can go back.
People can watch this and decide for themselves. So let's advance the argument a bit further, because I'd like to return to something that we actually started with.
I also had a point about translation.
And I would like to return to the point about the spiritualities. We talked about the fact that sincere actions, in and of themselves, right, depend upon what you see as good. Like,